Ella Carter, a 28-year-old architect from Sydney, stood at the large windows of her office, her eyes scanning the skyline. The city was alive with the hustle and bustle of the morning. Ferries cutting through the harbor, the hum of traffic, and the distant chatter of people going about their daily lives. The air was crisp, with a slight chill that hinted at the coming of autumn. She'd been working in this high-rise for the past 5 years, watching the city evolve with every new project and every new design. Yet, despite her professional success, there was a gnawing emptiness inside her. Ella had always prided herself on her drive and ambition. Raised by successful parents, she had learned early on the importance of hard work and achievement. But as the years passed, her determination to rise in her career had come at a cost. She had sacrificed relationships, personal time, and at times her happiness, all for the sake of her goals. Her personality was a mix of intelligence and tenacity, traits that had allowed her to excel in the competitive world of architecture. Yet, beneath the surface, she struggled with impatience, constantly pushing herself to do more, be more, and constantly questioning if it was enough. Her ultimate goal was simple: success. But in recent months, as she found herself climbing the ranks in her firm and securing high-profile projects, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more she needed: a deeper connection, a sense of fulfillment outside of the office. As the morning sun glinted off the glass buildings around her, Ella's thoughts drifted to her best friend, Jack Turner. He had been her confidant for years, the one person who understood her beyond the work facade. Jack, with his laid-back nature and artistic spirit, was everything Ella wasn't, yet they had always complemented each other. Lately, his words had begun to take on new meaning for her, especially when he encouraged her to take risks and embrace life beyond her career. But Ella, ever the planner, had always brushed aside such notions. She believed in the future, building something for herself, a future that she could be proud of. Yet deep down she wondered if she was missing out on something more than just her career. Unbeknownst to her, this morning would be the turning point in her life. A moment that would force her to confront her fears and make a choice that would change everything. The steady rhythm of Ella's day was shattered when her phone rang in the middle of a meeting with a senior board member. It was an unfamiliar number, and for a brief moment, she hesitated before answering, her mind still focused on the project proposal she was finalizing. When she picked up, her heart immediately sank upon hearing the voice on the other end. "Ella Carter? This is Detective Harris. I'm afraid I have some bad news about Jack Turner." Ella's grip tightened on the phone as her thoughts raced. Jack? What could have happened to Jack? Her mind swirled with confusion and dread as she tried to stay composed, but the words that followed from Detective Harris confirmed her worst fear. "There's been an accident. He's in critical condition. We need you to come down to the hospital as soon as possible." The phone felt suddenly heavy in her hand, the noise of the office and the conversation around her blurring into the background. Her world tilted, and her carefully constructed routine, the projects, the meetings, the ambition she had cultivated over years, faded away in an instant. Her thoughts weren't on her work anymore. They were solely with Jack, her friend, the person who had been by her side through everything. The thought of losing him, or worse, seeing him in pain, struck her like a thunderbolt. I'll be there right away," she stammered, her voice barely audible, as she quickly ended the call. Without thinking, Ella stood up, her chair scraping across the floor as she grabbed her coat and dashed out of the office, her heart pounding in her chest. The normally bustling streets of Sydney felt distant and surreal as she made her way to the hospital, her mind fixated on Jack. He had always been the one to encourage her to take risks, to break out of her rigid life and experience more than just work. He had been her best friend, and in the quiet moments, she had begun to wonder if it could be more. The hospital was cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her as she rushed through the halls. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling longer than the last as she approached the reception desk. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she asked about Jack, the panic rising within her. "Room 302. Just down the hall," the nurse replied, pointing down a sterile corridor. Ella didn't hesitate. She followed the nurse, her heart racing with each step. The door to Jack's room was slightly ajar, and as she pushed it open, the sight that greeted her was enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Jack was lying in the bed, unconscious, tubes and monitors surrounding him. His body was bruised and battered, and his face was pale under the harsh hospital lights. The person she had always known as full of life, spontaneous and vibrant, was now reduced to a fragile, broken figure. "Jack," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she rushed to his side. She reached for his hand, the warmth of his skin sending a rush of relief through her, though it was quickly overshadowed by the uncertainty of his condition. The nurse entered the room behind her, giving Ella a sympathetic look. "He's stable for now, but it's too soon to say what will happen. We need to monitor him closely for the next 48 hours. Ella nodded numbly, her thoughts a blur. She hadn't been prepared for this. No one ever was, she supposed. The hospital, the machines, the sterile smell. It all felt so foreign and unsettling, but it wasn't the physical surroundings that made her feel lost. It was the stark reminder of how fragile life was, how everything could change in an instant. She sat by Jack's side for hours, trying to push away the fear that threatened to consume her. Her mind kept racing to the life she had been living before this moment. Her career, her goals, her carefully planned future. She had been so consumed with her work, so focused on securing her place in a world of deadlines and achievements, that she had pushed aside everything else. And now, as Jack lay in a hospital bed, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Could she have done more? Could she have been there for him, truly been there for him, instead of retreating into the safety of her career? The hours stretched into the evening, and the familiar hum of the hospital began to settle into a dull background noise. But Ella couldn't shake the feeling that her life had shifted irrevocably. As much as she wanted to focus on Jack, the nagging thought wouldn't leave her. This accident, this sudden event, had forced her to confront something she'd been avoiding for a long time. It wasn't just about Jack's recovery. It was about her own life, the choices she had made, and the path she had been following. It was about what she wanted out of her future. As the night wore on, Ella finally stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool air of the Sydney evening felt like a sharp contrast to the stuffy hospital. She leaned against the railing, her eyes gazing out at the distant skyline, trying to process everything. Jack's accident had pulled her from the life she knew, from the relentless pursuit of her career. And now, she faced an impossible choice. What did she want? Could she continue down the path she had been on, chasing success at all costs? Or had Jack's accident, in some twisted way, been a wake-up call, urging her to make a choice between the life she thought she wanted and the one she truly needed? The stakes had never been clearer. Ella stood at a crossroads, unsure of what the future held but knowing that the path ahead would require her to confront her fears, her desires, and the truth about what she was willing to risk. And perhaps in the end, it would be her heart, not her career, that would shape the course of her life. The days that followed Jack's accident blurred together in a haze of worry and guilt for Ella. She found herself torn between being by Jack's side at the hospital and the mounting pressure from her career. Jack's condition improved slightly, but he remained fragile and disoriented, and Ella stayed by him as much as she could. However, the demands of her job at Sinclair & Co. were impossible to ignore. The King's Cross development, the most important project of her career, required her presence, and with every passing day, she felt more torn. Jack's recovery was slow, and though the doctors assured her there was hope, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of losing everything, both Jack and her carefully crafted future. Her younger sister Mia had been her steadfast ally during this time. Mia, with her more spontaneous and carefree approach to life, had always tried to remind Ella of what really mattered. "You need to slow down, Elle. Jack needs you more than your office does," Mia had said one evening when they sat together in the sterile hospital cafe, trying to escape the tension of the past few days. Yet, Ella found herself dismissing Maya's advice, unable to detach from the career she had worked so hard to build. "I can't afford to take a break. This project, it's my future," Ella had argued, but Maya refused to relent. Mia's unwavering support was a constant reminder that there was more to life than climbing the corporate ladder, even if Ella wasn't ready to admit it. Meanwhile, the pressure from her boss, Noah Sinclair, grew more intense. As the head of the firm, Noah had initially been understanding, allowing Ella time to care for Jack. But as the weeks wore on, his patience thinned. He began to call more frequently, his voice strained with frustration. "Ella, we need you back in the office. The board is getting restless. This project can't move forward without you." The words hit her harder than she expected. Noah wasn't just a boss. He was a mentor, someone she had always admired. But in that moment, his focus on the project rather than her well-being felt like an emotional blow. "I can't leave Jack right now," she had replied, her voice quiet with the weight of the decision. The ultimatum he presented, though not direct, was unmistakable. She had to choose between her career and her personal life. The tension between these two worlds was suffocating, and she found herself unable to navigate it. Jack's recovery was gradual, but with it came emotional challenges. As he slowly regained his strength, Jack began to question his own life choices. "I've been so focused on my art, on building something out of nothing," Jack admitted one evening, his voice rough from days of silence. "But maybe I've been missing the point. Maybe what matters is the people who are there when it all falls apart." These words struck Ella deeply. She had always been so driven by her career that she hadn't considered how much she was neglecting the people who cared about her. In these quiet moments with Jack, the realization hit her like a wave. She was losing sight of what truly mattered. But the pressure from work never let up. Noah's calls and messages became more frequent, his tone more demanding. Each time Ella stepped away from the hospital to attend a meeting or respond to emails, the anxiety crept in. The project was on the brink of collapse without her, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of that responsibility. The harder she tried to balance both worlds, the more she felt like she was failing at both. Her focus shifted constantly between Jack and her professional obligations, and it was starting to show. She found herself snapping at colleagues, missing deadlines, and making mistakes she would have once caught without hesitation. It wasn't just her career slipping, her sense of self was beginning to unravel. One evening while Jack was resting, Ella found herself alone in the hospital lounge. Her phone buzzed with a new text from Noah. "We need to discuss your commitment to the firm." The words hung in the air, suffocating her. Jack was improving, yes, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. And yet, Here was Noah, demanding her attention. The pressure to choose between Jack and her career had never felt more real, and Ella realized she couldn't continue on this path much longer. She needed to make a decision, one that would define the course of her life. Ella's life was at a tipping point, and she knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The tension between her career and her love for Jack was mounting with every passing day. The external pressures from Noah and her internal conflict about what to do next were creating a storm within her. As she sat in the hospital, staring at her phone, Ella understood that the coming days would require her to confront the hardest choices she had ever made. No longer could she pretend that both worlds could coexist without consequence. Something had to give, and the cost of that decision was still unknown. The decision came crashing down on Ella like a wave, drowning her in a sea of fear, uncertainty, and emotion. It was the day Jack's doctors finally gave a prognosis. He was no longer in critical condition, but his recovery was far from guaranteed. He would need constant care and support, and while there was hope for his full recovery, it could take months, perhaps even longer. Ella had been by his side through every step of the journey, but today was different. Noah Sinclair had called once again, his voice as sharp as it had ever been, demanding her presence in the office. The King's Cross project couldn't afford another delay, and he would not accept her absence any longer. With Jack in the hospital, his body fragile but his mind beginning to clear, Ella knew she was at a crossroads. She couldn't keep splitting herself between two worlds. The guilt that had eaten away at her for weeks now seemed insurmountable. If she left Jack to return to work, she feared that she would lose him emotionally, that the distance between them would grow irreparably. But if she stayed by his side, would she be willing to let go of everything she had worked for? Her career, her future, all of it seemed to hang in the balance. Her phone buzzed with another message from Noah. "I need your answer, Ella. We are at a breaking point. You're either in or out." The ultimatum was clear, and as she read the words, the pressure began to mount. Her chest tightened with anxiety, and she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, suffocating her. The future of both her personal life and her career seemed to rest on a razor's edge. She couldn't stay suspended in indecision forever. Ella stepped away from the hospital room, leaving Jack to rest. Her heart raced as she paced the quiet hallway, looking out over the city skyline from the hospital's rooftop. The view was breathtaking, but it did nothing to calm her. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of doubts, of what-ifs. She was caught between two lives. The woman she had worked so hard to become, and the woman she was when she was with Jack. The weight of the world seemed to be on her shoulders, and as she stood there, trying to catch her breath, a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "You don't have to do this alone." Ella turned to see Maya, her younger sister, standing behind her. Mia had been a constant presence, supporting her through every tough decision. She hadn't judged Ella for the choices she had made, and now she wasn't going to let her make this decision in isolation. "I don't know what to do," Ella confessed, her voice trembling. "If I go back to work, I might lose Jack forever. But if I stay with him, I lose everything I've worked for." Mia stepped forward, her hand on Ella's shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to lose everything, Elle. You don't have to choose between your heart and your future. You can find a way to make it work. It's not about all or nothing. It's about balance." Ella's mind raced as she listened to Maya's words. The idea that balance was possible seemed so foreign to her. How could she possibly balance her love for Jack and her career when both seemed to demand so much of her? But Maya was right. She had been so caught up in the idea of extremes that she had never stopped to consider the possibility of compromise. Maybe it wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about finding a way to make both parts of her life work together. Ella turned back toward the hospital room, her heart heavy but her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She knew she couldn't stay suspended between two worlds any longer. She needed to act. It was time to make her choice. She returned to Jack's room, where he was lying in bed, his eyes slightly open. He looked up at her, his face pale but soft. Ella sat by his side, her hand reaching for his, and she felt the familiar surge of love she had tried to ignore for so long. But today, that love wasn't the only thing she felt. There was clarity, too. "Jack," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been torn between what I want and what I think I should do. I've spent so much time chasing success that I've lost sight of the things that matter most. But you're what matters most." Jack's eyes met hers, confusion and vulnerability still lingering in them. "What are you saying, Ella?" "I'm saying that I can't do this alone," she said, her voice steadying. "I can't be the person I want to be, and the person I think I should be if I keep trying to hold on to everything at once. But I've realized that I don't have to lose it all. I can make this work. I just need to believe in myself and what we have." Ella reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Noah Sinclair's number. She knew what she had to do now. The line rang once, twice, before Noah picked up. "I've thought about it, Noah," Ella said, her voice firm and resolute. "And I've made my decision. I'm stepping away from the King's Cross project. I can't give you what you need right now, but I'm not leaving the firm. I'll take a leave of absence and come back when I'm ready. But I need to put my life first for once." Noah's silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She could hear his frustrated sigh before he spoke. "This isn't ideal, Ella. But I'll make it work. Just know that this might change things for you here." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm doing this for me, Noah. I'm doing this for my future, whatever that looks like." Ella hung up, her heart racing but her mind at ease. She had made the choice, and though it wasn't easy, she knew it was the right one. The tension that had been building in her chest for weeks began to dissolve, and she turned to Jack, smiling softly. He didn't have all the answers yet, and neither did she, but in that moment, Ella understood that the path forward wasn't about choosing one life over another. It was about finding a way to make both worlds work, and she was ready to try. The consequences of her decision were still to be seen, but for the first time in a long while, Ella felt a sense of peace. She wasn't losing herself to either her career or her love for Jack. She was finally taking control of both, and that was enough for her. Ella's decision to step back from the King's Cross project and prioritize her personal life was a turning point, not only for her career, but for her entire outlook on life. The consequences of her choice were immediate, and though the path forward wasn't without its challenges, it was also one of clarity and newfound strength. In the weeks following her decision, Ella took a leave of absence from Sinclair & Co. She spent her days at Jack's side, nursing him back to health and helping him regain his sense of independence. Their time together, though tinged with uncertainty, allowed them both to reconnect in a way they hadn't before. Jack's recovery was slow, but the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. He was no longer just the artist she had fallen in love with. He was the man who had stood by her through the ups and downs of her career. And now, it was her turn to do the same. Ella found joy in the simple moments, making Jack his favorite meals, holding his hand as they sat quietly together, and listening to him talk about his dreams for the future. Meanwhile, at Sinclair & Co., the decision had its own repercussions. Noah Sinclair wasn't pleased with Ella's choice, but he respected her for standing by her convictions. The board understood the need for balance, but they also knew the potential consequences of her absence on the King's Cross project. Still, they agreed to let Ella return when she was ready, understanding that sometimes personal growth and well-being needed to come first. It wasn't an easy conversation for Ella, but it was a necessary one. She knew she had chosen the right path, even if it came with its own sacrifices. Over time, Ella began to redefine her relationship with work. She didn't abandon her career. Rather, she adjusted her approach. Instead of chasing every opportunity with relentless determination, she focused on what truly mattered, being present for the people she loved and finding balance in her professional and personal life. She returned to Sinclair & Co. after a few months, but this time she did so with a new sense of purpose. She had learned that success wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about creating a life that was rich in both professional achievements and meaningful personal connections. Jack, too, underwent his own transformation. The accident had shaken him to his core, but it also led him to a deeper understanding of what he truly valued. He realized that, while his art was important, it was the relationships he built that gave his life meaning. With Ella's support, he began to explore new creative ventures, ones that were not solely driven by the pressure to succeed, but by his passion and love for his craft. He found peace in knowing that he didn't have to sacrifice his personal life for his career. He could have both, just like Ella had learned to do. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Ella and Jack stood together on the balcony of their apartment, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow across the skyline. They had come so far since that fateful day in the hospital, when Ella had been forced to choose between her heart and her future. And now, as they stood side by side, the future seemed wide open, full of possibilities. "I'm proud of us," Jack said quietly, his hand resting on Ella's. Ella smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Me too. We've come a long way." The world around them seemed to fade as they shared a moment of quiet reflection. It was in these simple moments, free from the pressures of the past, that Ella understood what it truly meant to live a full life. She had learned to let go of the need for perfection and to embrace the messy, beautiful reality of love and career intertwined. The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to a place of peace, balance, and understanding. As the evening deepened and the first stars began to appear, Ella realized that she had made the right choice, not because it was the easiest, but because it was the one that allowed her to grow, to love more deeply, and to live more fully. The price of love had been steep, but in the end, it had been worth every sacrifice. The future was no longer a daunting unknown. It was a canvas, ready to be painted with the colors of the life they would create together. And in that moment, Ella knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, with Jack by her side, and with the unwavering belief that love, when nurtured and cherished, could conquer even the toughest of obstacles.